Good afternoon and welcome to all. So, in the last session, we have discussed in the methodology and instrumentation about the incubators. So, we have gone through the incubators. Today, in this session, we are going to discuss about hot air oven. Actually, an oven provides a temperature higher than that of the atmosphere. That already you are familiar with these terms. The temperature range covered by the oven is in between 50 to 250 degree Celsius, not Celsius, centigrade. Then dry heat sterilization technique requires longer exposure time. So this hot air oven is coming under dry heat sterilization technique, because the sterilization technique in the last previous year we have studied deeply about the sterilization. That is the sterilization which can be divided into dry heat method as well as moist heat method. This hot air oven comes under dry heat method. So this dry heat sterilization technique requires longer exposure time, that is in between 1.5 to 3 hours, and also the higher temperatures than moist heat. But it is not good or efficient than the moist heat. Moist heat is more efficient compared to dry heat. But this dry heat requires higher temperatures. Then, what is a hot air oven? A hot air oven, it is an instrument which is used to sterilize equipments and the materials used in the medical field. A hot air oven, it is a type of dry heat sterilization, and this dry heat sterilization we are using, and it is used on the equipments that cannot be wet and on the material that will not melt or catch fire or change form when exposed to high temperature. So in this dry heat sterilization, I told that the higher temperature is required for this method. So we should sterilize the materials which are capable to withstand the high temperature, that is it does not need to melt or it does not catch fire, or there is no need of any wet, moist. The materials we are keeping in the dry heat sterilization should be dry enough. Otherwise this method is not efficient, because the materials should be dry. If it is wet, the sterilization will be inefficient. In the case of the moist heat sterilization, it uses water to boil items or steam them to sterilize and does not take as long as dry heat sterilization. So I had told that this dry heat sterilization sterilization technique, it requires more time as well as higher temperature compared to moist heat. And in the moist heat sterilization, they uses water to boil the items, or they steam the items. They apply the steam on the materials kept for sterilization. The next is examples of the items that are not sterilized in the hot air oven are surgical dressings, rubber items, because when the rubber items are exposed to higher temperature, what happens? It gets melt. So rubber items are not permitted for the dry heat method of sterilization, and also the plastic material. These are the examples of the items that are not sterilized in a hot air oven. Next is the principle of hot air oven. Actually, the sterilizing by dry heat, it is accomplished by conduction. In this method, the heat is absorbed by the outside surface. So the heat is absorbed by the outside surface of the item, and that heat passes towards the center of the item, and it could be layer by layer. So the heat from the outside passes towards the center of the item layer by layer. The entire item will eventually reach the temperature required for the sterilization to take place. That is the next step. Then dry heat does most of the damage. How the destruction of the microorganisms takes place using this hot air oven? It damaged by oxidizing molecule. So the main method of destruction is by oxidizing molecules. The essential cell constituents are destroyed and the organism dies. The temperature is maintained almost an hour. So after passing this temperature to the items in center of the item layer by layer, that temperature is maintained up to an hour, minimum 1 hour, to kill the most difficult of the resistant spores even. The most common time-temperature relationships for the sterilization with hot air sterilizers are 170 degrees Celsius bracket 340 degree Fahrenheit for 30 minutes, 160 degrees Celsius for 60 minutes, or 150 degrees Celsius for 150 minutes or longer, and it depending upon the volume. So these are the three types of common time temperature relationships for the hot air oven. This is the diagram, and it consists of an exhaust which is present on the outer surface. Then next is the diffusion valve. This is the diffusion valve where the heat get diffused, and this is the airflow damper. Then this one is the glass wool insulation, then turbo blower which may provide heat, and this is the motor. When the switch is on, the motor starts working and heat will be conducted. Now next are the items that are sterilized in a hot air oven. Glasswares, for example petri dishes, flasks, pipettes and test tubes. Then powders, for example starch, zinc oxide and sulfur diazine. Materials that contain oils can also be sterilized using hot air oven. Then metal equipments, for example scalpels, scissors and blades. Next we can discuss about the procedure which are involved while operating the hot air oven. First of all, we should connect the power supply. Then switch on the main power supply and the instrument mains. The next important portion is temperature setting. That is, we should set the required temperature. Press set point key to set the required temperature. Then increase the temperature, and we should keep this arrow to increase the temperature, and this arrow is used to reduce the temperature. So there is arrow, using this arrow we are setting the temperature. Now there is another part which is present in the hot air oven, that is temperature sensor. This temperature sensor, it will maintain the already set temperature, which is indicated by the blinking on the upper portion of. Then the temperature that already we had set a temperature, for example 160 degrees Celsius, and this can be displayed on the screen. The duration of the time can also be adjusted using the time adjustment knob. So there is also time adjustment knob. So all things we are adjusting manually and setting up. Then the hot air oven starts working. Temperature will be maintained. For example, if we are setting temperature for 160 degrees Celsius and time 1 hour, so that 1 hour this same temperature will be maintained for 1 hour, and this can be seen in the temperature sensor, and after 1 hour what happens? Switch off the power supply. The next is the safety and precautions we should use while operating this. We should remember while we are operating the hot air oven. The maximum temperature of this hot air oven is 3500 degrees Celsius. Ensure that exhaust blower is on before starting the oven. Because why? What is the need of this exhaust blower? Uniform distribution of the heat. Then ensure the GN2 plant is up. That is, I think these are the important parts which are coming. Then ensure that temperature does not shoot higher than the set temperature. Already we are setting a temperature, for example, 160 degrees Celsius. So you should ensure that the temperature it does not shoot than the 160 degrees Celsius. If we are setting 160, then it should be up to 160. It does not come higher than the 160. That we should ensure. Next is about cleaning. Wipe the surface, walls, top and bottom and trays of the oven with dry, lint-free cloth on daily basis so that there will be no dust particles in the oven. And also wipe all the parts and outer surface of the oven with wet, lint-free cloth which is soaked in purified water on the weekly basis, and fill this weekly cleaning. Next, the another precautions we should remember, that is, before placing the articles, make sure that we should dry those articles while keeping in the hot air oven. That is, dry glasswares completely, and also plug the test tubes with cotton wool. That is, the test tubes we are keeping, it should be plugged with cotton wool, and also this wrap this glasswares with craft paper. And also don't overload the oven because it will cause difficulty in ensuring uniform distribution of heat. Allow free circulation of air between the material, so it may helps in the complete sterilization. Another precautions, the contents must not be removed from the oven immediately as a slow cooling period is necessary. So after we are switch offing this hot air oven, we should not immediately open the door. We should allow for a slow cooling, because even though we are switching off the power supply, the temperature will be very high. So while we are opening it immediately, all the temperature will flow down, so it doesn't ensure complete sterilization. So a slow cooling period is required. When the temperature has reduced down to 50 degrees Celsius, then but not less, then we can open and take the materials. The reason for the slow cooling period is to avoid what? Sometimes if we are immediately opening the door, the cracking of the glasswares may occur, as well as preventing the airflow that could potentially contain contaminating microorganisms entering the oven. So there is a chance of contamination as well as cracking of the glasswares. That's why it requires slow cooling period, and after that period only we should open the door of hot air oven. Quality control. It is to check whether the equipment is working properly. So the two methods we are keeping. First is chemical controls, that is using Brown's tube. This Brown's tube, we should keep this Brown's tube along with the materials while sterilizing. So this Brown's tube, initially it was in red in color, and if the proper sterilization is ensured, then the color changes from red to green in color. Then another method is biological control, that is while placing the articles or materials for the sterilization in the oven.